On Friday the 16th of March 1990, Terry Wogan welcomed a plethora of stars to his chat show, including Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell. But to the millions of viewers tuning in, the real star would be Reg Varney. The On the Buses series aired its last episode in 1973. One final big screen outing followed with Holiday on the Buses over Christmas of the same year, and that was the end of On the Buses. This Wogan show 17 years later was to be the setting for a very special announcement. One that, as it stood, gave a hugely encouraging possibility that Stan, Olive, Blakey and company would once again be returning to our living rooms with the perfectly named title, Back on the Buses. Reg Varney states to Terry Wogan that it will be a pilot episode to see how it all pans out, and that the On the Buses team are hoping it's a success, and then to move on and make the series. The rest of the crew later joined Reg on the show. Anna Karen, Michael Robbins, Doris Hare, Stephen Lewis and Bob Grant. In Ronnie Wolfe and Ronnie Chesney's script, which is the final draft, Jack Harper does not appear. Heading into 1990, Bob Grant's diary was full to the brim with regular paid theatre work, which would have meant Bob having to turn down this return to On the Buses, no doubt having the conversation with the Ronnies in the later stages of 1989, which they then commenced writing the script without him on board. However, a planned 4-month tour was pulled after just 3 dates when the theatrical production company went bust, leading to various schedules altering which allowed Bob to take pride and place with his co-stars on Terry's sofa. The remarkable writing duo would have had no trouble slotting Jack Harper into the pilot episode or the episodes following this should the pilot have been successful. At the time of the Wogan show, it was all systems go for the cast and the writers. They'd even got as far as establishing some opening credits, described as series of shots establishing Butler's Buses. The business is run from an old terraced house with a yard at the side where the buses are stationed. A notice board outside the house establishes Butler's Buses, managing director Stan Butler. The synopsis is as follows. It is the 1990s. Certain people, former Luxton and district employees, have taken advantage of the new privatisation policy and easing of restrictions and have gone into business on their own. He is talked into going into business for himself by his wife Edna, described as a younger, flashy wife who wants everything of the best and completely dominates Stan. Mrs. Butler has put the bulk of the money up, who was talked into selling her home and now spends her time up in a granny attic. There is no love lost between her and Edna, who has taken her son and her savings. Despite going their own separate ways in the On the Buses series, in this, Olive and Arthur are together. Back in the days of the golden sitcoms, continuity was never allowed to stand in the way of a good story. Very similar scenario to the spin-off films and the On the Buses series, where the films had a little Arthur and the series they were childless. Olive and Arthur are still living with him in the house. Olive helps run the office in the front room and has taken driving lessons, so in emergencies she can take the bus out. But as history shows, she gets travel sick and has to keep stopping, which doesn't help the schedule. Arthur is more miserable and dissatisfied as ever, always willing to live there rent-free and get a small wage for doing the bookkeeping. Olive has a son Cliff, a boy of about 21. He's one of the bus drivers for the firm, very much modern working class, wants to get his hands on everything going for the least possible work. Much to Stan's annoyance, he wears a couple of earrings and a ponytail, but in Olive's eyes, he can do no wrong. Another driver is Mandy, pretty but tough girl in her early 20s, fearless, drives the bus like a sports car, and liked by all the passengers. Cliff really is besotted with Mandy, who plays the field. He makes some progress until Arthur, Stan and Joe all give him advice for young lovers, which of course ruins everything. She is not keen. The fault of Olive and Arthur's in-laws, and she prefers Nick, another younger driver, better looking than Cliff, and who has a mop of well-groomed, highlighted hair with blonde streaks. The buses are kept going by Joe, a young mechanic, a frustrated boxer who fancies himself as a successor to his idol Frank Bruno. Stan soon finds out that running his own business and being the boss is much tougher than being an unambitious employee. The Transport Authority, who have the power of life and death over these small operators, have an inspector, and if he considers it is not a satisfactory service, they can have their licence taken away. The butlers have a very good relationship with the current inspector, who unfortunately arrives one day to tell them he's retiring and has brought his replacement along. And that replacement, of course, is none other than Cyril Blake, back from a very chaotic attempt at retiring in Spain. Should the pilot have been successful and the new series commissioned, writers had already jotted down some memorable scenes for the episodes to come, stating the series progresses with the family struggling to run Butler's buses without going bankrupt, having to deal with constant harassment from Blakey, and with Stan and Edna, Arthur and Olive, Mum and Cliff, and sometimes Mandy trying to live together in the very cramped house without bloodshed. To boost profits, they try new money-making schemes that invariably go astray, running all-night buses, happy hour buses to take people to pubs and parties and bring them home so they can drink without having to drive, then having to handle drunks and happy courting couples left on the bus. They try to cash in on the tourist trade by hiring a bus to tour operators. To get the contract, the bus has to be equipped with facilities, coffee machines, washrooms, etc., which they install themselves on the cheap. On a trial run with a Japanese or German tour representative, things go disastrously wrong. Stated in an episode, there would of course be a scene with the family and staff all trying to learn a few phrases of Japanese or German as they listen to a language cassette. To keep up with modern requirements, the small bus could be fitted with a ramp so that it can accommodate a wheelchair. The inspector tries it out, unfortunately at the top of a hill. The bus brakes fiercely, the back door flies open, the ramp comes down, and the inspector in the wheelchair comes flying out and rolls off screaming down the hill. The family setup is crammed with personal problems. Family versus Edna, with poor frustrated Stan trying to keep the peace. The story itself is very funny indeed. Once the inspector arrives, the banter and Mickey take-in from the original series kicks straight back in. The cast were devastated when funding fell through, which meant Back on the Buses was over before it began. Would it have turned out to be a roaring successful return to our screens? We will, of course, never know, but the Wogan Show appearance reunited a phenomenal cast after many years apart, a cast that were one big family.